Before we get started today, I just want to point out the questions and answers box. So if you have any questions as we're going along, we will have some time at the end for some Q&A, but if you think of anything as we're going, if you just want to type it in the question box, then I'll try and address those as we go, and if I don't catch it during the presentation, then I'll happily go back through those at the end as well. But welcome this morning to our first K-12 Remote Learner Learning Spaces webinar. My name is Shelley McCollum, and I'm an instructional specialist with Remote Learner, as well as a member of our Learning Spaces team. And for those of you not familiar with that, Learning Spaces is our online subscription-based training platform. We currently have courses for Moodle course developers as well as Moodle administrators. So if you don't already have a subscription, you might want to talk to your account manager about getting you one, because we have webinars kind of like this one every week in Learning Spaces that are available to you as part of your subscription, as well as all of the self-paced courses. Today we're going to be talking about Moodle 2.9, and this is really kind of a overview of new features and maybe some ideas for how they might be incorporated into your courses. There are several new features, so this is going to be kind of a quick pace. Whoops. Let's see. Is there anyone? Can anyone else hear me? I just want to make sure we have someone who can't hear. So can I just get a yes? Okay, so it's not me, it's someone else. Great. Thank you. Ooh, I gotta be careful what I ask for. 20 people bounce back in. Give me 1 second. Okay. All right, so I think everyone else is fine. It sounds like it's a problem on their end. All right, so we're going to kind of go at a quick pace, so please feel free to, throw your hands up and ask questions as we go, and I'll try and slow it up for you. But let's get going. We're going to start off with the things that are new to Moodle 2.9 that are going to affect all users on your site, regardless of their role in any particular course or on the site as a whole. And so first we're going to talk about some of the navigation changes, and these are some of the bigger changes that have happened with 2.9. I think these are positive changes. I think Moodle is really working toward improving the user interface to make it easier for users to navigate, to find their preferences, to find their courses, to know where they are, that type of thing. So the first thing that's happened is that they have replaced the My Home page with what is now called the dashboard. And I say replaced, but they haven't really changed much on the dashboard screen. Still looks very similar when you go in to Moodle now and you go under the user menu, which was new in Moodle 2.8, that user menu, and here's a live site. You can see it right up here. It shows up in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. This came about in 2.8, and you would click on it. Well, now it has dashboard instead of My Home. So when you go to your dashboard, that's where you're going to be able to customize the blocks that the individual user sees. They could see their calendar. They have links to their private files area, and if they're enrolled in any courses, those courses they're enrolled in will typically show up in the middle of the screen. If by chance you're using the Ellis system that Remote Learner has as an add-on for Moodle, then a lot of people choose this middle section to put the Ellis dashboard widget, and they put programs and tracks and enrolled courses here instead of the Moodle courses overview. But site administrators can customize the dashboard page if they want to show specific items to all users in that area, but most of the time users customize that themselves. If you do have the list of enrolled courses on the dashboard, they do still continue to have the course reminders that will show up on that screen that will let them know if there's an assignment that's due, if there are forum posts that need their attention, if they have, SCORM packages or other elements of a course that have due dates associated with them, those will pop up as well as little reminders. So nice to kind of have everything in one place, but they're calling it the dashboard, and I have a feeling we're going to see some additional functionality added to that as future versions come out. Also, under that user menu, you now have a new page called a grades page. This is something that people have been asking for a while. If users go to the grades page, it will list all of the courses they are enrolled in and will display their current course total for each of those courses, and then they can click the title of the course. That is a link that will take them into the grade book for that specific course, so they can get a general kind of progress report as to where they are in all of their courses as a whole, and if they need more information, they've just got a one-click link that will take them into the specific course as well. Finally, we have in the user menu a new option that says Preferences. So when you go to the Preferences section through the user menu now, this is typically what you used to see if you went in to edit your profile as a user. So what they've done is they've kind of taken out the most common preferences that individual users had the ability to set for themselves, and they've put them so that it's much easier for users to find them. So for example, if they need to choose their preferred language, then they can click right here instead of going into the profile screen and scrolling all the way down. Now the important thing to know about this is that if you had been directing users to go into their edit profile, then you might notice that if it has been pulled out to the preferences screen, it's no longer accessible in the edit profile screen for the user. It would still be accessible on the back end for, say, a site administrator who's doing user management, but for the user themselves, they don't go into their profile screen to edit some of these things anymore. They get to it directly from the preferences screen. So they click something like preferred languages and it comes up. I think one of the more popular ones will be the messaging settings. This used to be kind of buried in the navigation menu, but now it makes it much more clear to users that they have the ability to customize how they're being notified of certain activities in Moodle, if they want pop-ups, if they want emails, and depending on whether or not you have text messaging enabled, then they could also have SMS text or push to app notifications that would come here if they're using the mobile app, and they would be able to check that box as well. So it gives users a more direct route to get to some of those options that have been in Moodle for a while but might have been overlooked because they were difficult to find. You also have more options for managing your badges. Badges have become very popular in Moodle in the last couple of versions. So they do have the ability to decide whether or not they want their badges to become public on their profile automatically or not. And then they have the ability to configure any external badge backpack if they're using backpacks to connect their badges to external sites. Then they can do all of that from their preferences page as well. Also, if they do go to their actual profile page, it's going to look a little bit different now. They've kind of changed the orientation. The user details will still show up, and then they will have their list of courses, but instead of just being a comma-separated text list, it's kind of a bulleted point. It's a little bit easier to read. They also will have access to a couple of reports from this page, such as browser sessions. If they click on browser sessions, it will tell them whether or not they're logged in to your Moodle site from more than one location. So that's great for security, especially if you're working on something like a campus area where students might go to a computer lab or a library per se, and they log in on a computer and then maybe they leave and they forgot to log off. They'll be able to look up their browser sessions and they can log themselves out remotely. It'll also give them all of their login activity. That used to be on the old one, but it's a little more visually apparent, I guess you could say. It's right there front and center now than it used to be. So the profile page is just kind of changing its orientation a little bit. If users have earned any badges, those would appear down below all of this information on the profile page now. Now, in addition to the navigation, we've had some changes to the user interface as they're working with materials. As I mentioned already, you do have the option of seeing those browser sessions, that report. It'll pull up and tell you whether you're currently logged in or your last session within a certain amount of time, and it will let you log out of those sessions as well. So it allows them to keep track of their security. Messaging has changed just a little bit, but it's really a nice change. This is something that used to bother me quite frequently. In the past, in versions of Moodle, if you clicked on a user's name and you clicked to send a message to them, wherever you were in Moodle, Moodle took you out of that area and pulled you into your messaging center in order to send the message. And then when you were done sending the message, you would have to navigate back to wherever you had been before. Now messaging is going to come up in a pop-up window, and it's going to keep you in whatever context you're in. So for example, in this screenshot that you see, I had gone into a course, I had gone into the participants list of the course, and I had clicked on a specific class member, and then I had clicked to send them a message. So the messaging window pops up, I can type my message, I click send message, and when this closes, I'm still in my course. So I just have to click up in the breadcrumb trail at the top of the screen in order to get back into my course material. It hasn't taken me completely out of the course so that I have to log back into the course, right? So just little things that are going to make it a little bit easier for your users as they're moving around. This one is also nice if you're somebody who has a lot of files on your Moodle site that you're trying to keep track of. There is now going to be a search field in the file picker if you are in the server files area. Now if you go to recent files or you go to private files, that's not going to show up. But if you go to server files, if you're an instructor, let's say, who has multiple courses, then you're probably used to seeing multiple folders that you have to look through, and then within those folders you would have to navigate to the specific activity. Now you just type part of the file's name in the search field and hit return, and it will locate all of the files that match that search criteria wherever they are on the server that you as a user have access to. So it's really going to help those, especially those that have multiple courses they're keeping up with. Finally, we also have some changes with the Addo text editor. So now with the Addo text editor, you have the ability to drag and drop images. Okay, did not have that ability before within the text editor itself. You could drag them onto the page and drop them, but if you were using Addo, you would have to hit the image, add image icon, and pull your image in that way. Now you can just drag an image from your desktop over. You can see it right here. It brings it in. It tells it it's a JPEG. I can let go anywhere in my content area, and it's going to drop that image in. And then you can just double click on that image if you need to make any edits to it. So again, increasing that functionality in Addo. Addo continues to grow. Lots of Addo plugins available out there to increase the capacity of that new text editor that was added in 2.7. So those are the ones that are going to apply to all users. All users can take advantage of those new features. But now we're going to talk about the ones that are really designed specifically for teachers or course developers. One of the big things that has changed is the quiz has undergone some additional reconfiguration. So they made changes to the quiz in 2.8, kind of changed the editing quiz screen and how you could drag and drop questions to change their order and the layout, and you could add page breaks in wherever you wanted them. So that came in 2.8. Now they've added section headings. So when you're in the edit quiz screen and you go under the add menu where you would typically add a new question, there is an option now to add a section heading, and the section heading comes up and you just click the edit icon and you can type whatever you want. It could be instructions for that part of the quiz, or again, just a heading if you wanted. Maybe it's grading information for how that section is graded. And that's saved there. And then you can still drag and drop your questions around so that you could take questions out of a certain section and move them into another one. The other thing that has been added are question dependencies. Now, question dependencies are pretty interesting, so let's go and look at these live. Question dependencies are going to allow you to basically hide a question in your quiz until a prior question has been answered. Okay, so I'm going to go into a course that we have that's just a demo course, and I'm going to go into our quiz that we have. and I'm going to go into Edit Quiz. Now, you can see over here I have some locks, and they appear to be in the locked position. This is going to be a question dependency. So if it's unlocked, there is no dependency for any of those questions. If it is locked, you'll notice that the lock appears between two questions. So if it is locked, what's happening is it's going to make, in this case, question 4 dependent on the student answering question 3 first. Okay? So now if I go in and I preview this quiz, they would have to answer this matching question before question 4 would be accessible to them. And I apologize, I'm logged in as an administrator, so I can't show it to you, but basically what would end up happening would be this entire area would be blanked out, and it would have a little message that would say, this question is dependent on the previous question being answered. And so they would have to answer question 3, and when they answered question 3, the screen would refresh and question 4 would appear to them. Now, you can have question dependencies for questions on the same page. You can also have page breaks between them if you wanted. It won't make any difference. Just when they go to the page that has question 4, it will tell them that that is not available until they have answered question 3 on the previous page, and so they'll have to go back. So basically, you just have to lock the questions down in order to turn on a dependency. So you really have a little bit more control as an instructor as to what order they complete the quiz questions in. The shuffle box, meaning that you want to allow questions, the order of questions to be shuffled, has been relocated. This used to be in the Edit Settings screen for the quiz, that you would check the box to allow questions to be shuffled. Now you'll see a shuffle box on the Edit Quiz page, and you'll notice that there is more than one shuffle box if you add a section heading. Okay, so you typically, oh, excuse me, didn't mean to do that. I was trying to scroll through a screenshot. That doesn't work very well. Oops, here we go. So what ends up happening is I can check this shuffle box, and only questions within this section will then be shuffled, or I can check the shuffle box at the top of the entire quiz, and then it's going to shuffle all questions within that quiz. Now, if I check the shuffle box for the quiz as a whole, it will automatically check this shuffle box for this section. I could then uncheck for specific sections so that, again, as the instructor, I get to determine that for this section, I want these questions to be answered in this specific order. So a little more flexibility as to how the questions are shuffled in a quiz in order to help, prevent cheating. Someone has asked, will it work to lock in lockdown browser? And I'm wondering, will it work in lockdown browser? I'm guessing you're talking about the locking of, the dependencies for questions. And yes, it would work for the dependencies of questions. So all of this should work with lockdown browser, because lockdown browser is not supposed to affect the way the quiz functions. It's only supposed to affect the browser in which the student can view it. Okay, so it should not have any impact on that. The other thing that is now available is a printer-friendly view. So if you allow printing of your quizzes, or if you go to print a quiz, you as a teacher, or if you allow that as for your students, when you click the print, it's going to come up in a PDF that's going to be easier to read. So for those of us that may have to turn in a hard copy, let's say of a final exam for records, school records, then you can print out a copy of your online exam, and it's a lot easier to do than it used to be. You just actually go into the quiz and you hit print and it lays it out. So kind of a nice feature. Now, the lesson module has also undergone some changes in this round. It now allows for groups. So you can actually use groups in a lesson to determine who actually participates in the lesson, or who can see one another's participation in the lesson, that type of thing. So you have the ability to use groups with lessons. If you are doing essays in your lessons, previously When you would do the grading for an essay, all you got was a plain text box. Now you get a full HTML editor when you're grading essays within the lesson. So if you want to change the font color, or if you want to embed images or a video or something as part of your feedback, then you can do that in the essay grading as well. You also now have the ability to require a certain amount of time spent on a lesson in order for it to be considered complete. So one of the nice things about lessons was that lessons will track the amount of time that users spend in it, and it's one of the few activities that does actually track the amount of time. Now when you go into a lesson, if you go into the edit settings of the lesson and you look at the activity completion portion, you see that you have the ability to say that students have to work on that lesson for a minimum amount of time. So what happens is if a student finishes that lesson before the required amount of time, a message actually pops up on the screen that says this lesson is not considered complete unless a minimum of, in this case, 20 minutes is spent. Would you like to return to the lesson? And it will send them back in. And they actually have to spend more time in there. So that'll keep them from just rushing through. This used to be part of what was the prerequisite lesson option that used to be in the lesson settings. That no longer exists. So if you're trying to do a prerequisite lesson, you can actually set the required time on the prerequisite lesson itself, and then on the lesson that is going to be dependent on it, you would use the access restrictions and say that they're not allowed to access the second lesson until this prerequisite has been completed. Okay? So for those of you who ever used prerequisites before, you probably know what I'm talking about. For those of you who didn't, it was a little bit confusing because you had to set the completion requirements for the prerequisite lesson in the dependent lesson. And now you don't do that. You set the completion requirements for the prerequisite lesson in that lesson, and then on the one that's dependent, you just set the access restrictions. So it's a little more like every other activity has been in Moodle. They're trying to get lesson kind of in line with the rest of them. One of the other things that's been added to also get lessons in line with other types of activities in Moodle is that lessons now have the ability to allow you to override specific settings for individual groups or individual students. Now, you've been able to do this in the quiz module for several versions of Moodle now, but you will see if I come into this lesson and I go to lesson administration, I can click either group overrides or user overrides. And I have the ability to override anything like the time limit, the availability dates, if I want to allow one user to have 2 or 3 extra days, maybe they need some type of accommodation, they need increased time on it. If I want to allow them to have the option to try a question again, I can do that for individual users. Once I establish those overrides, I do have a list of anyone that I have overridden the lesson for and what overrides have been applied to them, so I can keep up with that and keep that for my records as well, especially if you're dealing with maybe a student who has an IEP and you're trying to make sure that you have documentation that you have provided accommodations to them. Now, the choice activity has undergone a couple of changes. Starting with Moodle 2.8, you had the ability to allow users to make more than one selection when they were participating in a choice activity. Now you have the ability to allow users to preview the choice options before the choice window actually opens up. So what ends up happening is you can have it previewed, and you can restrict the answering to, you can have a time period it's open from, right, until, and you can restrict answering to that specific time period. If you check the show preview box, then they can still click on the activity in Moodle, and they would be able to see the question and the options available to them, but they wouldn't be able to make their choice until the open window, until the open date. Okay? If you uncheck show preview, then they could see that the choice activity was there, but if they clicked on it, it would get a message that would say this choice activity is not available until June 16th. All right, so kind of nice. And then to make it a little bit easier for teachers to make sense of their data, now when you pull up a response report, if you have any users in your course who have had their status set to inactive in your users list within the course, they will no longer show up in the response report for the choice activities. They used to show up and you'd be like, oh, only, 95% of my students answered it, why didn't the rest of them? And that other 5% were inactive users, and you're never going to get any data from them, so now they don't show up in the response report. So if you're looking at your report by percentages, they all come out more accurate because it's only active users. There have been a few other changes to different activities within the courses. So from now on, the glossary import-export feature will now allow you to import or export images as well as attached files. So if you're using the glossary module for something like a resource warehouse, and maybe you have a lot of attached files that you're putting all in a glossary so that they're easier for individuals to locate. If you do an export of that glossary, all of those files will be attached, and then if you re-import them into another course, the files will be uploaded and attached with the entries as well. Also, looking at database activities, it used to be that database fields were all optional, but you can now require specific fields to be filled out when someone is adding a database entry. Little things have also gone on with the workshop, for example. It's now going to display on the page if you're going into a workshop. It's going to use the entire full page width, so all the blocks, anything else that might be on the page is going to disappear, and the workshop's going to take up the full page, which makes it a little bit easier, especially if people are using rubrics to grade those workshop activities. It's a little easier for people to see more because they're getting more real estate on their screen. There is also now a text option for the navigation buttons in a book. This sounds like something little, but it's actually pretty cool. People got kind of excited about this one, so I'll show it to you. If we go into a book module, you'll see previously you only had arrows at the top and bottom of the screen, and now it actually gives you the option to have text, and what it does is it puts the chapter and subchapter titles along with the arrows. So this is set up in the settings of your book. So you go into your administration block to book administration, edit settings, and it's going to be under the appearance option, and you'll see where it says style of navigation. You can choose text, you can choose images, and that's going to usually just be the little whatever icon buttons are part of your theme. Part of your theme. It will change it to whatever the buttons are that go with your theme. So now if I go back into my book, you can see I have just the images. This is what we're all used to, but now you can actually have a little more guidance for them so they know what chapter they're going to. The activity description field. I don't know if any of you have run into this, but being a former site administrator, there is kind of a philosophical conundrum here with the whole activity description field. So some organizations like to have that description field there so that teachers are forced to put in a little information about the activities so that if students pull up certain screens in their course, they have kind of just a general idea of what each activity is. But what was happening is a lot of people, they never use those. They don't have them displayed on the main course page. So they would actually take the title of their activity and just copy it and paste it into the field because it was a requirement. That description field is no longer required by default. So if as an organization you want to require it, you can go into the settings under site administration, plugins, activity modules, and you go to common settings and you can check the box to require the description field. Otherwise, it is by default now set to no. It used to be set to yes by default, and you had to go into each activity module type to turn it off, but now it's set to no because so many people weren't using it. And I have a question that came in, and it said, is there any way to add activities into a folder that is already made in the course? No, you really can't add activities into a folder. A folder is only going to be able to house documents that you upload. But now what you could do is, depending on how your course is structured, you could change your course layout. So if you go into the settings for your course and you choose a different layout, then you could have all of your activities grouped into a specific topic section, and depending on what your layout is, then your topic sections could be collapsed, or you might have a grid layout so that you have to click on a grid image and then that topic would expand in a pop-up window and all the activities in that topic would then expand. So you could still kind of condense what's on your main course page just by grouping your activities into topics and then changing the layout that you're using. So for something like that, if I were you, I would look into things like the grid layout and the collapsed topic layout. Those are two that are really popular, and I know we use those on our Learning Spaces site quite frequently, and there are plugins that are out there that can easily be added to your site, so if they're not on there already as options, you might talk to your site administrator about adding them. Happy to give you more information on that at the end of the course, at the end of the webinar. So, and then the last thing I want to point out is this grade to pass option. So if any of you had ever used this before, this was a great little option that for any graded activity, it allowed you to set what was considered the passing grade. But to use it, you had to actually go into the gradebook and go to the categories and items screen and click the edit settings for a specific activity from within the gradebook, and then you would set the grade to pass. What this would do was it will color code your gradebook so that passing scores are coded green and failing scores are coded red. Okay? It will also color code your activity completion marks. So if you're tracking activity completion in a course and you have these little check boxes off to the side, if you have a grade to pass assigned, for example, this assignment, instead of just the standard blue check mark, which is what you typically would get, if you finish the assignment with a passing grade, it will give you a green check mark, and if you finish the assignment with a failing grade, it would give you a red X to let them know that yes, you had done it, but you didn't really succeed, right? So the grade to pass had a couple of aesthetic and display qualities that came with it. In addition, if you were using activity completion features, or, excuse me, if you were using access restrictions, you could restrict, for example, this sample assignment to people who had passed this new assignment. So you could say, when in this assignment setting, I'm going to add an access restriction for activity completion, and it has to have been completed with a passing grade. Okay, so that's where grade to pass came into play. But you used to have to go into your gradebook to set it. Not so anymore. Now the grade to pass is actually going to show up within the settings for any assignment that has a grade attached to it. So I'm just going to go into my settings for this assignment. I'm going to go down to the grade section. Whoops. The grade section, and you'll see I now have grade to pass right here. Now you can still set it up in the grade book the way you used to be able to, so if you have people who were used to doing it that way, they can still find it there, but it's going to show up as a new option for people who had maybe never seen it before. So you might want to let them know exactly what that will allow them to do. And somebody just wrote in, I'm sorry, I just saw it, where I was talking about course layouts, and those are course formats. Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Elizabeth. Yes, it's called a course format in the settings is what I was telling you about, Amy. So the grade to pass is going to show up here. Now, this is nice if you had never used it before, and maybe you're on a site that has recently been upgraded. Then you can go into all of your old assignments or forums or lessons that were being graded, and you should see this option now in the settings for that. So you could go in and add that in after the fact as well. It's not only going to show up on new things that you add to your course. You can go back in and update things to that as well. There are a couple of course management features that are also now available. Number one, you can delete an entire section of a course. Now this is magic for those of us who spend a lot of time developing courses. Used to be you were not able to delete a section, you could only hide a section. What a lot of people would also do is they would take a section they weren't going to use anymore, they would drag it down to the very bottom of their course so that it was their last section, and then they would lower the number of sections for the course. And what that would do, it would technically delete the section, but anything that was in the section would stick around. And so you would end up with what they call orphaned activities. So you can see I'm going to drag my topic section all the way down, whoops, almost all the way down. And I would bring it down to the bottom, and then I would hit minus at the bottom, and it would basically take all the activities that were in it, it would make them orphaned. So the activities weren't deleted, right, but the section technically was deleted, and the activities are just sitting there hidden until you move them somewhere else. You can still do that. The interesting thing was if you added a topic back in, your old topic would show up complete the way that it had been. Okay. Now, though, you have the option of just deleting the topic, and it will ask you to verify that you're absolutely sure you want to delete it, because when you delete the topic, it will now delete all of the activities within that topic. So no more orphaned activities. So you really want to make sure that that's something you actually want to do before you hit the continue. Okay. But really nice for those of us who have been developing courses for a while to have that option. There's a new block available within courses. This is called the activity results block. If any of you have ever played with the quiz results block, very similar in function. Quiz results block, though, would only work for a specific quiz. The activity results works for any activity that is a graded activity. So you add the block, and then you get to go and configure it, and you can tell it which activity you want it to display information from. So you could use it for a quiz, like the quiz results block used to do, or you could use it for any other activity. And you can choose highest grades and lowest grades, and you can choose whether or not you want your results to be anonymous, or if you want the student's name to be displayed with it, or if you only want ID numbers for some level of privacy. So they really kind of use this sort of as a leaderboard in classes to encourage competition, or just give the class a general idea for how the class as a whole did on a specific assignment. Elizabeth was saying the mass actions block allows you to do the deleting of a topic section as well. As I recall, I don't think mass actions, though, is a standard block, so that would be a plugin you would have to add in order to have that. That's not a standard Moodle block, that's an additional add-on, but if you have that, yes, it would allow you to do that and bulk, delete, indent, move specific activities if you want. But now it's just standard that you can delete an entire topic section. You don't have to have any additional plugins to do that. Now, you also now have the ability, if you ever make a backup file, to add groups and groupings that you've created in your course to your backup file. Previously, would not do that. You would have to recreate groups if you were moving your file, say, from one course to an entirely new course. Now you can add groups and groupings to the backup file so that they can be restored as well. Also with groups, you have the ability to create a new group if you are adding a cohort sync to your course. So if I go in and I'm enrolling users, this is all about user enrollment, right? If I go under users and I go to enrollment methods and I'm going to click on the methods, I could choose a cohort sync. And I've been able to do that for a long time. And then I can choose what cohort I want to sync to my course. That's not new. I could then decide to add all of the students in that cohort to a specific group that exists in my course. That's not new. That's been there for a couple of versions. What is new is that if I don't already have the group made, I can create a new group right here in this screen. I don't have to go out of this screen and create the group and then come back in and select it. So if you use cohorts to enroll students, you can do that all in one step now. And finally, for course developers or teachers, you have the ability to select an individual to be a key holder for your courses if you are using self-enrollment keys. So basically what ends up happening is you have to have a role created on your site, and there is now a permission that can be added to that role, and it is that permission allows them to distribute self-enrollment keys, okay? Or enrollment keys, I think is what it says, distribute enrollment keys. So the site administrator can either create a role called key holder, and it gives them the right to do that, or let's say you're a teacher and maybe you have a teacher's aide, and so maybe you have put them with the role of non-editing teacher in your course. You could go into your course, and within the course section, within the course administration, excuse me, where it has permissions, you could come to that role of non-editing teacher. Now, this would only be within your specific course. Whoops, excuse me, I hit the wrong button. Let's try that again. You could go to the role of non-editing teacher, okay, and then you could look at the permissions available for a non-editing teacher, and you would have to find the permission that talks about self-enrollment, and it would make them not managing enrollment, but they added it down here at the bottom somewhere, appear as a self-enrollment key holder, and you would have to say allow for that specific role. And then anyone that had that role would be listed in the course listing as a key holder. So when someone clicked on your course and it took them to the screen asking them to enroll, and it had the field for the enrollment key, below that it would say, if you need the enrollment key for this course, please contact, and it would have that individual's name. They're known as the key holder. So now it doesn't have to go all through the teacher or the site administrator. You can make multiple teachers the key holder, you could make non-editing teachers the key holder, or you could create a special role for someone and assign that to whoever in the course you wanted to be the key holder. Now we have just a few minutes left to talk about what's new for site administrators, not as much as some of the things that have been in the past, but if you're a site administrator, it might interest you to know, and teachers, this will probably interest you as well, that Moodle has changed the way that it locates time zones. So previously you had two options for time zones. You could choose what was called a UTC code, and that would be the GMT -6, right? Or you could choose a region and city code. So it would be like America, Chicago. All right? Now the UTC codes never updated automatically for any time changes associated with daylight savings time. So when daylight savings time rolled around, if you had users using a UTC code, the times would then be off for them. And if you had a teacher or a course developer who was using a UTC code, when they put in due dates and times for assignments, those times would then be off for everyone because they would not update. Okay? So we always tried to encourage people to use the region/city codes because those would automatically update for daylight savings time. Well, that was a lot of confusion. That was unnecessary. So Moodle has now moved to standardized PHP date and time codes. This is a standardized database. They are all basically region city codes, as you can see. So they look a lot like the old region city codes. There are no UTC codes available, and all of the PHP date time codes will automatically update for that region and city based on whether or not that area observes daylight savings time. Okay, so everybody should be on the same page now, and all of that time change confusion should hopefully go away. You also no longer have to go and click the update time zone option when you're setting up a site, or if you have recently done an upgrade to a site, something like that. That's not there at all anymore because there are no time zones to update because the PHP ones are updated automatically. So kind of nice to get rid of that daylight savings time issue that a lot of people ran into. You also now, as a site administrator, have the ability to restrict the number of what they call concurrent logins. So you can decide whether or not users have the ability to be logged into your site on more than one machine or through more than one browser at the same time. So you could allow them to have 2 logins, you could allow them to have 5 logins, or you could only allow them to have 1. Okay, totally up to you, and that's all controlled through the plugins authentication area on the Manage Authentication page. A lot of people wanted this for security and also sometimes for cheating purposes. A lot of teachers might have had some things set up where, okay, well, the browser, they're going to go in a quiz and they're going to be in a quiz, and I can see whether or not they, I can lock them in that quiz. They might not have been using lockdown, but they are using what's within Moodle where they're only allowed to use that browser, but that never kept them from opening a second browser. So if they were working in Chrome on the quiz, they could go to Firefox and open up a separate browser and go into the book module and be looking up answers for things. So this can kind of help with that. You also now have the ability to add custom file types. And what does this mean? Some people ask me. So Moodle recognizes the majority of major file types. So .docs, it realizes that that's a doc document from Microsoft Word, and it displays the little Microsoft Word icon. If you have a .ppt, it knows that's a PowerPoint, and it's going to display the little PowerPoint icon next to it. But let's say you have a .flp because you're a school that's using Promethean flip charts, and Moodle doesn't know what .flp means. Well, you can now go in as a site administrator to the server section to the page for file types, and you could add the extension of a particular file type. This is really good when you're using proprietary softwares that may not be so common. So you could put the specific software file type, and then you could actually choose, if you wanted, the icon that will display with that type of file. Okay, and you have the ability to set how Moodle is going to deal with that, but it's basically going to allow Moodle to know that that's a valid file type so that it will display it correctly so that users can then download it without Moodle confusing their browser so that they know what it is. Works great. Also, if you're working, I used to work on a high school campus where we were teaching digital graphics and animation, and they were using all kinds of specialized software. It would have been great to have had this at the time because I could have put the extensions in for all of those software types. So if they're putting their 3ds Max files up, then Moodle will know that's a 3ds Max file. It'll let it upload and download without any kind of inhibitions. Prohibitions, inhibitions, either one. It's not going to get in the way of it, okay? So it's going to help Moodle better understand what files it's supposed to be allowed to deal with. Those are the major changes. Now, there were over, again, 150 changes or something ridiculous like that. So these are just the biggies that most people are really excited about. If you want more details, you can always go to moodle.org. docs.moodle.org/29 because that's the version, and then /en if you want English /new_features. So if you want to copy that down, if you go there, that will take you through the entire list. They also have a couple little videos if you wanted to watch that where you could see any others, details about some things. And they also have a link to all of the documentation about why the changes were made, what Moodle tracker tickets they were tied to, if they were specifically fixing a bug or if it was a requested feature or something like that. So for any more information, I would definitely encourage you to go there. Now, Moodle 2.9 was released at the end of May. That means that Moodle 3.0 is probably going to be released in November, I believe is the release date that's set for that, sometime toward the end of November. So hopefully we'll see you back when that comes out, and we'll show you what's new in that version as well. Now I have about 10 minutes left. If any of you have any questions, happy to answer them. If you want to just type them in the question box, that's probably going to be fastest because then we don't miss anyone. And I see Steve Wilkes. I just want to know, Steve Wilkes, you aren't possibly Steve Wilkes that used to work in Highland Park, are you? If you are, you better type in there because I know you. And if you're not, I'm really sorry, but you have a wonderful namesake because he's a really great guy. But Steve, I see you have your hand up, so if you have a question, could you possibly type it for me? It's much easier than just turning on all the audio for everyone, only because we tend to get a lot of feedback, and I want to make sure everybody can hear everything. There is a recording that's being made of this session right now, and you should get a follow-up email. I think it goes out within 24 hours of the session that would have a link to the recording. So yes, ma'am. Also, if you are a member, if you have a subscription to Learning Spaces already and you're a participant on Learning Spaces, the previous version of this webinar, we did this shortly after Moodle was released, 2.9 was released. It's in the archive in the webinar course. And there are actually two because we broke it up so that we could get into a little more detail, and we went through all the new features, and then we had a separate one for the user interface. So those are in there. Another reason, if you don't have a subscription to Learning Spaces, to go get one. Any other questions about anything I showed? You want to see it in a little more detail? You're curious about anything, you're wondering if it's in there, going to be in there soon? The good news is no big changes to gradebook. They did all of those in 2.8. So if you're moving from somewhere before 2.8 to 2.9, there were more changes that happened in 2.8. So we have a session for that too. If you're interested, we have a video for that one as well. Yes, Remote Learner has been supporting 2.9 as of, I believe, the beginning of July. I think it was like the 1st of July when we rolled that out to clients. We usually have it's usually about 30 days, sometimes it's a little bit longer, before we offer it to our clients because that's how long it takes our development team to go through and vet. And by vetting, typically what they do is they go through and they check all of the golden add-ons to make sure they work. They look for any obvious compatibility issues. The one thing that I will tell you about 2.9, if you're a Remote Learner client, is as of the moment, if you're using the RL Master theme for your site, you would have to change your theme to something else. I know that our development team is going to be working on updating the RL Master theme to be compatible with 2.9, but as of right now, it is not. And it will display properly, but what you won't be able to use are the user navigation features. So the user menu doesn't work with the RL Master theme right now because that is a custom theme. So users can't get to their preferences, and it's a little trickier to get to their profile because those things are being moved out of the navigation block. Right? When you look at the navigation block, you don't see the My Pages anymore. So they have to go through their dashboard to get to many of those things, and they still can't get to the preferences. So if you're using RL Master, you either want to wait or you want to move and just make sure you're aware you're going to need to change your theme to something else when you move. And somebody said, thank you so very well. You're very welcome. Status of gradebook fixes to keep grades from changing. I was not aware of an issue where grades were changing, so I don't have any information on something like that. I apologize. I'm kind of curious now what was changing, though, if you want to elaborate, but I have not heard of anything. Your best bet on that would be to check Moodle Tracker, if there is a tracker ticket that you've been following, to see if anything was grade change on the update from 2.7 to later versions. Oh, I'm guessing a lot of that had to do with defaults that had been set on the more recent versions that may have been different from 2.7, and also the change from sum of grades to natural weighting and the way that natural weighting was working. I have not heard about any other, like any big fixes on any of that at the moment. I know that our support team has looked at many cases of that and has been able to do successful upgrading without those changes affecting things. Because I know somebody out of North Carolina Community College District had told us, yes, that when they went in to their gradebook that there was a big pink warning that came up that some things were set differently, and that was something that they have been working on. There's nothing that I know of for Moodle headquarters. I just know that our support staff is aware of that and has been working around that when they do upgrades to keep those changes. Yeah, I remember that did not make a lot of people happy. Um, I have not heard of anything else, though. I do know that 3.0, they're supposedly working on outcomes quite a bit, so it'll be interesting to see what that does, which affects gradebooks too. Is there a way to print out essays uploaded in activities? I don't know of a way to print out essays like in a lesson where you could just print all of the essays. Now, if they have the essay turned in as a separate assignment, yes, when they go into the grading screen of an assignment, they do have the option to download all submissions. And so they could download all of them and then print them out that way. But as far as on the back end, if you're grading like an essay in a lesson activity, I do not know of a way. If anyone in here knows of a way, please let us know. After they are graded. No. Other than printing your screen, that's all that I know of, is that they could pull up and say print screen. And then choom, choom, there we go. And as far as the downloading out of the assignment, I've never tried to do that after they've been graded, so I can't even tell you if the feedback is anybody out there ever tried it. Since we have a group of users, we can ask them. Yeah, print screen is the easiest thing that comes to mind, because if they pull it up on the screen and they just hit print screen, it's just going to print out whatever is on their screen. So, but that might be problematic if it's an extremely long essay entry, and if they have extremely long feedback and they're wanting it all on one page, that might be problematic. I'm looking at the assignment. I don't know if we have any in this demo that have been graded yet. None of these have actually been graded. So it doesn't look like that's going to be an option for this one. To look at, but hopefully that will help you somewhat. If anybody else has any ideas, please throw them in there. Any other questions for me today? Well, thank you all for joining us. I believe this is going to be a regular monthly event, so watch your emails because we are planning on presenting some webinars like this every month for y'all to give y'all some peeks at new features, talk about best practices, answer common questions, that type of thing. So hopefully we'll see some of you back next month. Y'all have a lovely day.